Well, here with Brian Carroll, formerly of Offaly, and Adrian Ronan, former All-Ireland winner with Kilkenny. Adrian, I'll start with you. Kilkenny winning 219 to 113 in the end, but it wasn't the most convincing of displays, was it?
No, Kilkenny were disappointed with the performance possibly overall. You know, Offaly, I think, were poor. Offaly didn't perform it like they'd like, and Kilkenny kind of went into that same mode as Offaly and weren't hurling fluently at the end of the day. But look, again, going up to Galway, that wouldn't be good enough to play Galway.
Brian, what did you think of it from the Offaly point of view?
Look, I wouldn't be happy with that, Oisin. I know we went toe-to-toe with Kilkenny for long periods that game, but a return of 113 just isn't good enough in inter-county hurling. You'd expect that after maybe 35 minutes of hurling. You know, bar maybe Joe Burgan, he was the only one that made any real inroads in that Offaly forward line. Midfield hurled well, and Pat Cameron did reasonably well on TJ Reid, but Kilkenny just seemed to be in about third gear for large parts of that game. They were very wasteful, had a lot of wides, and you know, really could have put Offaly to the sword today. You know, Offaly just seemed to have a level of acceptance in that second half that the result was beyond them, and just seemed to go through the motions. And it wasn't until Joe Burgan got a goal after a wonderful pass from Shane Dooley that really they began to believe that maybe they were in this game, and you know, they pushed on a little bit. But eventually then when Liam Blanchfield got that second goal for Kilkenny, it just seemed to push it beyond Offaly.
From the Kilkenny point of view, Adrian, that first half they were a little bit lax. They missed a few shots. They had 9 or 10 wides. What do you put that down to, and how worried will Brian Cody be ahead of next week's game against Galway?
Again, we spoke about it on the radio, I suppose. The fact that Kilkenny and the panel, you're talking about a panel, players are coming on, and the decision making out of a lot of the Kilkenny players today wasn't of norm, because again, they're playing for places. Young Standing stood up today, scored 4 great points. But again, I think there's a lot to do. Fennelly came on, got 2 great points, but drove 1 or 2 wides. Aylward came on, drove 1 or 2 wides. And they were decision making, as I said, because lads now know there's a huge opportunity for them to get on the Kilkenny team. We keep mentioning that this is an opportunity for a panel of 25 players at this stage. So again, I'd be disappointed with the decision making out of Kilkenny today. That's why we had 18 wides. Is
that down to the youth, or is that down to the pressure that Offaly put on them? Because I suppose we could say the same about last week against Dublin. The decision making wasn't great, but as Brian Cody said after that game, a lot of that was down to the pressure that was put on them.
No, Brian alluded to it there. I don't think it was down to the pressure that Offaly put on him. I think it was down to the players themselves, just poor decision making and trying to do the best and trying to get a score to settle him in on the team, settle him in on the game. As I said, young Blanchfield took his chances today, scored 1-2, Scanlon. But again, as Brian said, that performance for Kilkenny wouldn't be good enough against Galway. Galway for a big, huge, stiffer test.
Final score.
You really need to turn the PA up here. The final score being read up from Wexford Park.
For Wexford.
Oh, so that makes things interesting. It's probably good for Offaly, isn't it, that Wexford won, Brian Carroll?
Yeah, it certainly is. You know, we'll definitely take that result. It was the same last week. I was actually delighted to see Liam Blanchfield rattle the back of the net last week up in Parnell Park. So it gives Offaly a fighting chance to try and stay up in this Leinster Championship. I think obviously the result was beyond Offaly today, this week and last week against Galway. But I think they have shown for large parts that they are, you know, deserving of being in this Leinster Championship. Albeit we're not going to win a Leinster final anytime soon. But you know, I think we are a step above those teams that are in the Joe McDonagh Cup, and it'd be a shame to see either Offaly and probably Dublin at this stage now, one of those 2 teams to go down. So I just think it's a little bit unfair, the system where, you know, none of the Munster teams are probably going to be relegated unless you know, Kerry can beat them in a playoff. It seems, you know, going back to Cote Norwell, some, you know, all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others.
2 legs good, 4 legs bad. Ronnie, just to get back to today's game, do you think that, I suppose looking at it from the Offaly point of view, that Kilkenny were making bad decisions at times and Offaly didn't take advantage of that? Do you think that's the thing that Offaly need to learn, just to be that bit more streetwise? Because they seem to have the players, they played well in phases, but they're just not putting it together for 70 minutes.
Yeah, Brian said it. I think they accepted, particularly in the second half, that they maybe weren't going to win it. And you know, as we said, the changes that Kilkenny made, it looked as if Kilkenny obviously realised that we were going to win it as well, which was very unusual for Brian Cody, that we made those changes and Offaly kind of accepted. But for long periods, and we mentioned on the radio, you know, for the first 20-15 minutes, Offaly looked very comfortable, very composed on the ball, worked the ball out well, and then just seemed to die in the 10 minutes before half time, or else Kilkenny lifted it. But when Offaly were on form, they looked good, and as Brian rightly said, it'd be very unfair to see Offaly, you know, going down to the Joe McDonagh, because they're true, you know, they've played reasonably well against Galway, reasonably well here today, and probably with short a lack of belief.
What about the younger lads for Kilkenny? Is that something that Brian Cody will be particularly pleased with? The likes of John Donnelly, the likes of Mossy Keown, the likes of Luke Scanlon, because if Kilkenny are to come back to the top, they need those boys to drive them on, and they're the players who drove them on today, especially Liam Blanchfield. Now, he's been around a few years, but in the last 2 games he's got 2 big goals, and he's showing an instinct and a finishing ability that he hasn't shown perhaps in the past.
Well, his contribution today was huge. I mean, not only did he get a 1-2 and should have had another goal and missed 2 goals, but his contribution overall to the players, to the Kilkenny full forward line, young Scanlon, young Donnelly, Mossy Keown, that was a big ask last week in Parnell Park. Anyone that goes up to Parnell Park, particularly a forward, is too tight. It's very tight, and the best of forwards went up to Parnell Park and came back with nothing. We have played at home. That's the only thing. You expect a player to play well at home. They're used to Nolan Park. The test now is against Galway, up in Galway. That's a massive test for those young lads. But today, they'll walk away, and Brian Cody will walk away saying, yeah, the young lads have reacted positively. Would I like more? Of course he'd like more. But they've passed today's test, and that's all he can do.
Brian Carroll, are Kilkenny looking mean again? And are those young fellas that we just mentioned there, do they look like they could bring Kilkenny back to the top?
Yeah, that was a young full forward line, and I was very impressed with the three of them. Just to touch on Liam Blanchfield, he did his best hurling underage at full forward, particularly for Kieran's and Kilkenny minors. So he's probably happier in that central role. The last couple of years he's probably been coming in corner, coming in at wing. So it's interesting to see there, when he got his chance at full forward, he certainly took it. Luke Scanlon was excellent that first half, popped over 4 points in play, but to me he was given too much space and time. He was certainly on his game, took his chances really well, and went off to a rousing applause from the Kilkenny fans here today. But Cody knows himself that he needs to build on this, and just touch on the other corner forward, actually John Donnelly, really impressed with him. He's a big strong physical guy. He worked that last goal for Liam, goal chance for Liam Blanchfield. He was 2-on-1 situation but did really well, and he's used to the ball in particular. He's very composed in his play for such a young man.
What about Galway? You had a good look at them last week against Offaly. They didn't play this week. I saw it mentioned on the Sunday game that perhaps there's more of an emphasis in going for goals. Did you notice that about Galway, and do you think that that could be something they could use to their advantage against Kilkenny next week? Because there was times where Offaly got in behind Kilkenny today, and we saw last week Dublin did the same.
Yeah, look, Galway clearly went for goals at every opportunity last week. They had 5 goals rattled past Owen Call, but Owen Call was arguably Offaly's man of the match. He stopped 3 or 4 brilliant shots last week. So Galway clearly probably felt a little bit hard done by in terms of the criticism that went towards them last year for their lack of goal scoring exploits in their run to win the All-Ireland. But they certainly will have tried to change that this year. But that Kilkenny backline, Dublin showed it last week, particularly Liam Rush, when they ran at them. They conceded chances and they conceded a lot of frees and run them. I was critical of Offaly today, that I just felt they didn't run it at that Kilkenny backline enough. There's I know Paul Murphy's back in there at wing back now to try and steady things up. Killian Buckley obviously at centre back, but no back, no matter who they are, no matter how experienced they are, when you're being run at it, it's hard going, and being turning them facing to their own goal. That's the key to these hurlers. Anytime you let them win the ball and drive outward, it suits clever inter-county players. So turn them facing to their own goal and run at them.
Adrian, the lessons learned from a Kilkenny point of view from today's game and maybe last week's as well against Dublin?
Well, not to switch off. That's the simple thing today. Not to switch off, not to be relaxed. They were in a comfortable position, 116 to 111 at one stage, 6 or 8 points up, going in third gear, as Brian rightly said. I think that's the big lesson today. No matter who you are, who you're playing against, or whoever you're against, you have to be ruthless and clinical. And we did, in the end, miss 2 or 3 chances that would have put the match completely out of sight for Offaly. And that's probably a big lesson, because we brought Offaly back into the game. So, lesson today: don't switch off, be ruthless and be clinical.
We didn't really see today if Kilkenny have improved with dealing with a sweeper, did we? Because Offaly kind of opened up. Last week against Dublin, Kilkenny struggled. When they've come up against a sweeper in the past, they've struggled. So we don't know, going into that Galway game next week, if they're any better in that sense. We don't know if they're any better at making the decision to go short when they need to or go long when they need to. Yeah,
well, during the National League we coped with the sweeper very well. Last week in Parnell Park we didn't cope with the sweeper. Today Offaly didn't play with the sweeper. Galway won't play with the sweeper, so we won't see that next week either. But again, Kilkenny backs, I think in the end of the second half, Deegan played very well, Pádraig Welch, Joey was composing. Today Kilkenny, another huge find is Conor Delaney, right half back. He was arguably the best back for Kilkenny today, and arguably in running for man of the match from a Kilkenny point of view. So again, Kilkenny will go up, won't be all guns firing against Galway. We'll tentatively go up and looking forward to the challenge, but will it be a bridge too far? Well, not in Brian Cody's eyes, but maybe a performance in Salt Hill next weekend is something we want, and consistency. But if you're Brian Cody, I'm sure I know what he wants.
Kilkenny have never gone anywhere tentatively. Brian, are you buying that? Kilkenny going somewhere tentatively?
No, certainly not. But no, I understand he's concerns about going to Salt Hill next week. Maybe it is a bridge too far for this Kilkenny team, but they showed throughout the league that write them off at your pearl. They were excellent, particularly in the closing stage of that league against Wexford here in Nolan Park, and obviously against Tipperary in that league final. These players probably will respond better to the challenge. That's the one thing. Maybe when inexperience happens, it's trying to find that level of consistency. Whereas these younger players, they rose certainly to the challenge in the latter parts of the league, and they'll be licking their lips looking forward next week to Galway and Salt Hill, and that really is going to be a massive battle and something really to look forward to.
And finally from you, the lessons learned for Offaly today.
Yeah, from Offaly's perspective, I think it's always been about building for next week for this Wexford game in O'Connor Park. There's been nothing but a puck of a ball between us for many a year, and I'm really looking forward to it. I know we're after taking 2 beatings, but let's be honest and let's be real about this. I didn't expect anything but victories for Galway and Kilkenny against Offaly in those first 2 games. What I will say is we have been reasonably okay in those couple of games. We probably don't believe in ourselves enough, but next week against Wexford in O'Connor Park, I think we should really go for it, attack them with everything we have and really go for it. We showed that when we go toe to toe with anyone, we can do it, and go with a little bit of belief next week, and I think Offaly can get a victory there.
Brian Carroll, formerly of Offaly, Adrian Ronan, formerly of Kilkenny, thank you both for joining us here in Nolan Park.
Thanks very much.
Hey, hope you enjoyed that latest offering from Off the Ball. If you want to subscribe, and you should, check out just up here. All our latest stuff is just down here. Generally, knock yourself out.